to describe to a blind person what a pen looks like. A pen, you could say all you want about it, but put it in the blind man's hand and he can touch it and feel it, he can click it and he can write with it, scribble, and be able to apprehend the meaning of a pen just by touching it. But a cathedral is enormous. It's a building. What do you say about a cathedral? Well, okay, we'll get into that when we start discussing the questions, but I put here some notable cathedrals. There's the Salisbury Cathedral there, and then, and actually it's the only picture I have, I'm sorry about that. This next picture, though, is parts of the cathedral and different features. So you have here buttresses, you have a spire, and then of course the infamous gargoyle. Okay, so that's the vocabulary. So now we get to the questions. The first one, by the way, this is a story, as you know, as you should know, a story about a husband and wife. The story is being told from the husband's point of view. These are 3 stories, by the way, that have been told in first person. So it's a lot more personal, but there's a limit to the amount of information the narrator can give you because it's being told from one person's viewpoint. So when the story opens, the narrator's wife has invited a blind friend to stay with them. Which specific passages indicate the husband's misgivings about never having met a blind person before? What preconceptions does he have? Okay, so what we know as the story goes along is that the blind man who's coming to visit this man's wife, he used to be her employer. She used to work for him, and her job was to read to him. And they did become very close, and after she quit her job, they still kept in touch. Well, how did they do that? You can't write letters back and forth. He'd be writing off the page, and she writes a letter. He can't read it. He's got to have somebody to read it to him. So what did they do? They would record messages on cassettes and send those back and forth through the mail. Now, when I've talked to students about this, one of the questions I've asked is, what would make a cassette recording of what you want to say to a person, what would make that much more intimate than a letter? And most students come up with the answer immediately. That is that, and you probably experience this when you write emails. You write an email to somebody and they reply back kind of angrily, as though you had insulted them. You didn't even mean anything by it. They just read it the wrong way. There's a problem in writing, and that is that it doesn't matter what your tone of voice is, doesn't matter what you mean. Words that are written on a page, there's a doorway there of interpretation, and it's vague, it's cloudy. It depends a lot of times on the mood of the person reading it, how they're going to take it. If they've just been insulted or been in a fight with somebody, if they're feeling especially sensitive, they get your email or they get your letter, they're not going to read it the right way. They're going to insert insult into it that was never there to begin with. The difference with a cassette tape is if you send a cassette tape to someone, everything you say, you can add all of the volume, the tone, the nuance, the vocal nuance, all of that you want to the things that you say. You're not going to talk like a robot. And you can imagine this woman did not talk to this blind man like a robot. They were clearly very close friends. And this is actually a sore spot for the husband. He knows that they exchanged cassette tapes between the two of them. And part of what's coloring his response to the blind man is jealousy. So, what do you do when you're jealous? Well, you might look at the one legitimate thing that you got upset about in the first place, but then you invent an arsenal of crimes that the other person has committed. And we do this all the time. I remember when I was dating my husband, his roommate did not particularly like me. I don't know why, but, you know, we would talk all right to each other, but in private he would say things to my husband that were not very complimentary. Anyway, he stood up for me, and at one point he was telling me the story. You know, he said, my roommate was saying this, and then I said that back to him, and I just don't really like the way that he, talks about you. And then it was very funny. It was cute. He said, and you know what else he does? He doesn't even, when he puts the butter on his toast, he gets crumbs in the butter. And it was like, I thought, if I gave him enough time, he would invent 20 things that his roommate did that were so viciously evil. But my point is that if I had left crumbs in the butter, that would have been cute. Well, maybe not, but you understand what I mean. So you can imagine this husband doing exactly that same thing. He might have the one legitimate thing, and even not even really a legitimate thing, but a thing that might need to be talked about in order to calm his fears. And that is this intimate relationship that his wife has, a very intimate emotional relationship that she has with this blind guy. So there's the legitimate thing. But then he's going to turn this blind guy, because he's jealous, he's going to turn this blind guy into... he's going to demonize him. So, what are the references? Well, in paragraph 1, he says, it says he didn't know the blind man, and that his idea of blindness came from movies. And those ideas were that the blind moved slowly, they never laughed, they were solemn, so forth. In paragraph 5, you'll read that the blind man received intimate tapes from his wife, and again, this is a reference to at least one thing that would make him jealous. In paragraph 9, he says the blind man shows up with a beard. Now, I don't know about you, but I read that and I think to myself, what, okay, sorry about the interruption. Okay, we were talking about the beard versus no beard. I don't know about you, but I would expect that a blind man would have a beard. I mean, I can't imagine a blind man wanting to shave all the time. Even if you get good at it. I mean, just how much can you actually see? I would be afraid of cutting myself all the time. So it would make more sense to me that he would have a beard. But this guy, he's being irrational anyway. He's thinking, what's this guy doing showing up with a beard? He shouldn't have a beard. And then in paragraph 17, he says the blind man's eyes were creepy. That's a very loaded word to use. You might, if you were objectively describing a blind person's eyes, you might say that they were